This is Dr. Ruben Chen, and welcome to the Vital Signs Podcast. Hi, this is Dr. Ruben Chen. Welcome to another Vital Signs Podcast. I have a great guest here today with us. And before we get started, I want to do a shout out to Sunrider International. I know it is our main company, it is our parent company. And I want to talk about some of the awesome products that they have, everything from shampoo and conditioner to herbal toothpaste. Everything is natural, and we really focus on having concentrated botanicals that are good for the body and good for the whole family. So if you are interested in learning more about Sunrider, you can check us out on www.sunrider.com. You can also, if you like our Vital Signs podcast, you can also follow us on our social media accounts on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and you can see our past interviews. We're also on various podcast platforms like Apple Podcasts, iTunes, that type of thing. So check us out there. So to get started, I have a friend here. His name is Dr. Dan. So Dr. Dan, can you sort of explain a little bit about your background and what you do for a living?
Sure, great. First of all, I'd like to say how honored I am, and I appreciate the opportunity to spend some time with you with this conversation and with the viewers. I'm a naturopathic physician and a licensed acupuncturist, and I practice in Eagle River, Alaska, and I've been doing this for about 30 years. And I just really love the type of medicine I do because it focuses on wealth and on health and well-being, not wealth, health and well-being. And I get to interact with my patients and help them to improve their health and to learn the things that are about balance and to live a good, full, and happy life. The way that I got into this is pretty of an interesting story. And, I'd sort of like to mention how I met Dr. Chen Sr. the very first time, which was when I was in college. And I was a young man back then. It was in 1979, I believe it was. And I've done a lot of work, as you know, I've done a lot of work in the martial arts. And we were there in the wrestling room. And there's about 40 or 50 martial arts types, and they're all doing their different grappling and different sparring techniques and things. And all of a sudden, we just noticed this calm come over the whole room. And it was just like a moment of silence or something. And as I looked to my left, I saw your father, Dr. Chen, enter the room, and he's in the traditional hakama. And he had such a way about him that you could just feel like the chi, the energy that surrounded him. And then as I noticed him, he started doing some rolls. And, when your father rolls, he doesn't hit the ground. He just rolls in the air. And he's just very, very skilled and very powerful in the art of Aikido and probably many other arts as well. Well, the instructor that I worked with, David, is, he's a special forces guy, martial art guy, jujitsu guy, and he was highly regarded and respected in that room. And for some reason, your father and him ended up sparring together. And I just sat there as this new, student and just in awe as I watched them. And then I remember seeing this blur of activity, and my instructor, David, was knocked out, and your father caught him before he hit the ground. And then he said to him in a very, I almost want to say a loving way, "Oh, you dropped your guard. Let me show you how." I was just so impressed. And then, of course, my instructor was so humbled by the experience and just in awe of this wonderful martial artist who was in the room with him, that we spent some time, and we spent probably the next couple hours talking with Dr. Chen. And this was before he started Sunrider International. And I remember being in, actually, we sat in the sauna together with my instructor and with your dad and myself. And I was just afraid to say anything because, I was just basking in the awe of these, great practitioners. And fast forward, we went to a little herb store on Center Street there, and this was in Utah. And I remember seeing a couple products under the glass shelf in the herb store. And one of them I remembered was the Sun Breeze, because your father had been talking a little bit about the Sun Breeze essential oil. And it really resonated for me at that time because, I knew what it was like to have a lot of sore muscles and aches and pains. And so I was very interested in that. And I think there was probably a box of Cali there and, maybe some quinary or something, but the Sun Breeze really stood out in my in my mind at that time. And then fast forward, after I graduated, I went down to Arizona to continue some work in martial arts and to, go for my second degree black belt in jiu-jitsu. And because that's where David was from. And so we were there and we'd work out every morning, for hours at the gym. And actually, I met Mr. Clean there. I don't know if you remember Mr. Clean. He was a television star, and he promoted a product there. But he used to work out there with us, and with his shiny bald head. He's a pretty interesting guy. But anyway, we went to the Gentle Strength Co-op, and I remember seeing a little brochure right on the door, where they post all the the hippie things on there that they would promote about different activities that are going on in Tempe and in the surrounding area. And there is a picture there saying, come learn about Sunrider International. And it was hosted by Bill and Jackie Malin. And on the picture, there was a picture of your father there. And so Dave and I just looked at that and both our mouths fell open, thought, oh my gosh, if Dr. Chen's on there, we're going. So
actually the first time I've ever heard my dad being associated as a hippie guy. So
yeah, well, the Gentle Strength Co-op, is a really good cooperative, and they had a lot of really healthy food and lots of multiple vitamins and, different herbs and botanicals and, what those, health food stores are like. And back then in that day, it wasn't as common as it is now. And so, yeah, I probably shouldn't have said the word hippie, but
no, but I think things are maybe a little bit more alternative or a little bit what I would say probably at that time would be considered new age or something like that. But definitely that is, that's my dad. He with martial arts and like with business and with Sunrider products, he is not a follower, and he likes to take he will focus and get really good at something, and then he likes to pull back and see a bigger picture and evaluate, okay, so I did learn how to do this one thing, but now I've learned a lot more about everything else. Does that one thing I learned even make sense? And I'm willing to change in order for it to really make sense in the broader sense. So yep, that's definitely my dad.
Yeah, he's very articulate and just brilliant. And so, long story short, I ended up going and meeting with Bill and Jackie, and they explained to me this, about Sunrider International. And I was I was already into it because I had met and talked with your father, and I knew anything that he said I was very interested in. And so my wife at the time was not as interested as I was, because we looked at this little box, and this box had 5 bottles. The quinary came in 5 individual bottles back then, and I think it was called the Sun Pack or Starter Pack or something. And it came with the Sun Breeze, which I really like that part, and then Fortune Delight and Cali, which is really good. And I can't think of, the stevia was in the box. And so we made the decision to try it out. And from there on, the rest is history. I called my parents who were in Ontario, Canada, and they weren't, they thought it was really interesting that their son would, would come across this multi-level thing or something, and they weren't really into it. But oh my gosh, when they started using the products, it changed their lives, and changed my entire family's lives, a lot of my friends' lives. And the reason I tell this story is because if it wasn't for Dr. Chen, I mean, I was studying English literature and zoology with a focus on human anatomy and pre-professional, but I really thought I was going to be an English teacher. I really wanted to teach, English literature. And, but when I found out that, doctor literally means to teach, it really helped to bring that and cement that together. But it was definitely your father that really helped point me in the direction of Oriental medicine. And a couple other things happened in my life that helped to, bring me here to, naturopathic medicine and to the blend with Oriental medicine. And so I owe a great debt to your father, who helped me figure out what to do with my life. So,
Oh, no, that's fun. That talking about that naturopathic and Oriental medicine, can you explain to the average person? Because I know not a lot of people understand what a naturopathic doctor means. So, what is a naturopath, and how is it different than um, other healthcare professionals?
yeah, so that's a good question, and we get asked this a lot. But naturopathic medicine, we go to a 4-year medical school. We have to do pre-medical studies in college and get accepted, and then we do 4 years of medical school, and it's a lot of the clinical physical diagnosis and the basic sciences, and we study pharmacology and pharmacokinetics, and we study all the things that you do in traditional medical school. But the way we do the area that is different is that we focus on non-drug therapies. Even though we're skilled in the drugs that come from natural products, our goal is to really work on nutrition and lifestyle and those kinds of things. We also learn about physical medicine. We do a lot of manipulation, sort of like the DOs. The old DOs used to get a lot of physical medicine in their training, so we get a lot of that. So if somebody comes to see me, I look and clean up, help them clean up their diet. We look at detoxification of the system, and we look at the blood. We run lab work, and we look at food intolerances and allergies, and help to reestablish that balance. At the same time, I would be able to do acupuncture on them, or do a manipulation, or whatever it is that they're interested in, or that I'm able to provide for them.
Mhm.
So it's very rigorous, and now it makes me tired to think about all the work I did.
No, I can understand that.
Yeah.
So when how did Sunrider help with this path of naturopathic medicine? I mean, how do those things combine in your eyes?
Well, it's sort of an interesting story, because when I had a chiropractor who is the older brother of a friend of mine through college, and I went to him after I had graduated school, and he didn't, we did a treatment, and we got to talking. He says, "Wow, with your background, you should go to the National College of Naturopathic Medicine in Oregon." And I said, "Wow, that's interesting, but I really don't know what that is." And then he explained to me a little bit about what it was. Is about natural medicine, and about how to use botanicals and homeopathy and natural therapeutics to help people get well. And of course, I said to him, "Well, do they do Oriental medicine there?" And he said, "Oh yeah, definitely they do that." And I said, "Oh, well, I'm very interested." And so I went home and told my dad. I said, "Well, I'm going to go to Oregon and maybe check out this school in naturopathic medicine and Oriental medicine." And he said to me, "Well, isn't there a school in Toronto you can go to?" And I said, "No, Dad, I got to go to Portland, you know."
Of course, you got
And
to go all the way across to
yeah,
another
and
country,
of course,
obviously.
a couple of years later, I realized there was a school in Toronto, but I never really did my homework on that. But As I got there, I found out that naturopathic school really didn't teach Oriental medicine as
Hmm.
much as the Oregon College of Oriental Medicine did, which they shared their facility. So I basically went to naturopathic school all day and an Oriental school at night school. And because
Wow.
of,
That is not an
yeah,
easy path. That's a lot. Okay.
yeah. So they don't do that anymore because it's so grueling. But
I
now
do
they
know
have
some
combined
naturopaths
degrees.
that did learn acupuncture though in their schooling. Is that just very rare, or is that it just not as common anymore? Or
Yeah, it was rare when I did it, but some of the people that I held in high esteem were duly licensed. Now they have a combination program where you can do it in, 5 or 6 years. Um, and a lot of the physiology and the anatomy and all those things, apply to both programs. So in the way we did it, and of course, the nature of education is expand, expand, expand. So they're always adding new classes, and then it becomes a huge deal. I'm sure that you've experienced that, how they keep adding on new classes and such. But
yeah.
so the naturopathic aspect of it and the Oriental aspect of it, I find that it really blends well together. I don't think it matters what type of medicine that a doctor practices, as long as their interest is in really being the best that they can be to help the patient that's sitting in front of them. And
Mhm.
there are many ways, whether it's Tibetan medicine or Ayurvedic medicine, or if it's Native American medicine or the Oriental arts, all of those things are dealing with the same human form. I mean, we're all essentially the same. And I believe that there's universal principles that govern health and well-being. And so I really like that. So I see myself as really having a toolbox with many different things that I can try if things don't work. And it also helps because some patients aren't into acupuncture and Oriental medicine, and some people, they just want the fix. Some people are more interested in Chinese herbs and acupuncture, and some people want to have manipulation. And so, there's a lot of different things. And I mean, if I see pediatrics, it's nice to know that there's a homeopathic remedy and some basic nutritional guidelines that I can offer. So how Sunrider started that with me, and this is really a good story, because when I got into my first class of acupuncture, I was a little bit cocky because I had the training. I was looking this morning at this binder that I have on the Sunrider. You used to give these incredible binders with all these spec sheets and booklets in there. And this one's dated like 1990, but there's some stuff in there from the late 80s. But it talks about regeneration and how powerful regeneration is. And it's not about substitution. It's about our bodies being able to regenerate. And I stood up in class and I said, well, if we just eat properly, won't our bodies completely regenerate and will spiral to perfect health? Which is how Dr. Chen explained it, which makes sense to me. While the
Mhm.
teacher just was completely said, no, that's not how we do it,
Hmm.
And
Interesting.
as you look at the 8 principal forms of acupuncture and the different types of acupuncture, and even in 5-element, Chinese medicine, they're always about bolstering up the liver. Or if you have irritable bowel syndrome, that's like the liver attacking the spleen and the large intestine, for example. And so you have to subdue the liver, and then you have to tonify the spleen, and you know about all that kind of thing. But for your viewers, that's the model that Oriental medicine uses to determine what it is that we need to do to fix people. And to me, it just seemed inferior to what your father had taught.
Yeah.
Because if we eat right, our bodies are in control and they're very powerful. And so I like the idea of the body is a garden, and we need to stand in awe of how powerful our bodies are, and to respect the process and to trust the process, and to work with that as much like you would if you're gardening. And so I really like that part of it, versus the 17th century Descartes, the body is a machine type thing. If there's something wrong with your heart, you get a new one, right? And it's amazing that we can do
I
that.
hope we
And I
don't do
mean,
that. That's not a really successful system. And anybody who's had a
right.
heart transplant knows that.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
but no, I mean, I agree with that. And it's very interesting because a lot of people will think that my dad is just putting like a Western spin on Chinese medicine. And in reality, he just like I was saying before, he learned really well this one section, and then he took a step back and took a wider view of the entire process. And isn't it better to keep the body maintaining its own health, keeping uh, um, itself in balance and healthy, optimal function instead of always just repairing this? Because what ends up happening is, and this is true right now of most doctors, it's really good at fixing sick people, but they're not really good at keeping people healthy. And I think that's actually a very distinct thing. Is people think a doctor keeps you healthy. Doctors fix sicknesses, but they don't keep people healthy. And this is a big issue, I think, in the field of medicine at large. Even with Chinese medicine, it's that thought process as well.
Yeah, no, that's very well said. I agree. And human beings just tend to be a little bit arrogant. Sometimes they find out things and they think, wow, they're really good at it, and they want to mess around with it. And really, the power of nature is just paramount in everything that we do, everything in our environment, the way we live. And it's in naturopathic medicine, you want to establish those, normal surroundings and habits of life that work with nature's laws. And you want to, empower your own vital force, your own energy, and to build up your blood and keep your blood healthy, and to eliminate waste and toxins, and to think in such a way that it takes you to your highest version of yourself. And then any Oriental book, as you know, when you look up that, the very first chapters are about diet and lifestyle. So to
Mhm.
me, it's the same. And what we need to do is we need to live in harmony with our environment. We need to breathe good air. I remember Kari mentioned about how important it is to be outside and not inside, because outside air is so good for us. And so, the air that we breathe and the breathing, and in the Oriental arts, as you know, breath is the pump that pulses the blood through the body and to generate life. And so having good air, and then the fuel that we put in, and the food that we put in is so important. And then, of course, the water that we drink. And then how we think is so important, because every cell, of course, we have the mitochondria and the engine of the cell, but we also have a mind in the cell. And a lot of the new psychoneuro research and the biome and all this kind of stuff they're talking about is our cells have their own intelligence. And we don't really know what all that means. But basically, it's sort of how you think is very important to how your body is going to function. And so I think it's really important to think those positive thoughts. And they've done some studies where they've shown how important that is. There's one experiment they did where they took oatmeal and they put oatmeal in a jar. I'm sure you've heard this. And then you can look at that oatmeal and just focus all your anger and irritation and all that towards that jar. And then the other jar, you focus against, happy thoughts and joyful thoughts and all those kinds of things. And then, it's obvious that the jar that you focus your negative energy on with the oatmeal just turns black and it molds. And the other one stays good for a long time. So, I mean, quantum physics, Oriental medicine is quantum physics. How that works when you put a needle in and then you put two needles in and each needle affects the movement of the other needle. It's just brilliant how the Oriental people that studied this, they were so being agrarian, they lived in nature, they studied nature, they watched it, they really appreciated it for what it was, and they learned from it. I mean, Sheng Nong, who walked through the gardens with his entourage of people, tasting every herb that there was and outlining what it tasted like and what meridian it entered and what were the good qualities of the herb and the bad qualities of the herbs. And then from there on, be able to develop a system where they could determine what that herb was good for and watch it heal people. I mean, and they did that with thousands of herbs. And that is so fantastic to me. And they were very good at writing it down. Now, the Native Americans here in this country, they had a similar method, but it's been lost because it wasn't written down as well as
This
the
was an
Oriental
oral
culture.
tradition. Yeah.
Yeah,
One of
yeah.
the actually talking about that, I remember so I'm a Western medical doctor, and but when I went to study Chinese medicine in Taiwan, one of the things that I guess maybe it wasn't, it seems really obvious now, but at the time I remember feeling like it was a breakthrough that different personality types, um, you hold your tension, you hold your pain in a different way, which seems very obvious because we know that pain is a subjective thing. Health can be somewhat subjective as well, but your mood, even the kind of person that you are, can affect your health and be very, if you're a very, very rigid person versus a very relaxed person, those type of things have consequences on your overall health. An interesting study is in India, which they linked longevity, how long somebody lived, to male pattern baldness. And why they did that is that for men in India, it is very actually uncommon for men to lose hair. Up until the 20th century, they noticed that there was an advent of male pattern baldness because the baldness was related to stress and their mood. And the more male pattern baldness that they had, the more likely they would link that to longevity. So, not to say that if you're bald or you're losing your hair, then you're not going to live very long, but it definitely is related to stress. It's related to mood. Your character can influence your health. It was something that I remember at the time blew my mind, and now I've been practicing for a number of years and I see it a lot. It seems common sense. I'm going to switch gears a little bit and ask you because you did mention martial arts in the past, and I am a martial artist. I've been training martial arts since I was a child, and it is one of my heavy passions. I take my kids to train with me a lot, and I don't know if they like it or not, but they seem to still do it. But how did you get into martial arts? Because 30 years ago, they trained martial arts, and I don't know, very differently than they train it today. And when my dad was young and he was training, I mean, they basically had these tatami mats, like just woven bamboo on top of newspaper on concrete, and they would throw each other and fight each other literally on concrete. So it it was different at that time. And I so how did you get into martial arts, and what kind of martial arts training do you have?
Well, when I think I was around 6 or 7 years old when my father, who did judo in Ontario, and we went down to downtown in the well, it's a small city, but it has a rough section. But it was a sports center, and up above it there was a dojo, and my father's good friend there taught Wado Ryu judo, and it was a very heavy, hard judo training, and so that was probably my first exposure to it. As I went there, and I'd go with him and do what I could with judo and learn. And I was, there's it's like going to a dojo and participating and learning those moves and such. And you're as a child, they didn't really cater to children at this place, but they were nice enough to let me participate. And then as I became a teenager, I started to, in those days we could hitchhike. And so I'd hitchhike down to a place in a school, in a high school, and I'd go to the same school. And so I learned a little bit about judo, but it was sort of inconvenient to get there. And then by the time I got to college, I signed up immediately for uh, a class in martial arts, and it was Shorei Kempo at that time. And there was, I really liked it and did very well at it. And, but then and I can't remember what my ranking was. I think I got to a brown belt or something in that style. But, and then I met David, who was doing jujitsu. And it was sort of like a smattering of different combat art and things. It was a very old form of Gojo Ryu, and it's not associated with the Gojo Ryu karate. It's a very different form, sort of like, I don't know, comes down from the samurai. You know how convoluted those stories get on where your art comes from.
Yeah.
And so I worked with him and got my brown belt with him. And we used to go out and roll down the sidewalks. I mean, that's where we would roll down the sidewalks. And I can remember there was, when we do the high falls, that two people would lift you up supine, shoulder height, and then let you go. And you had to, slap out of that fall. And then a lot of rolling and, rolling from, high amounts. His instructor could roll from, like from 30 feet. I mean, he would just, stand up on top of the stage, over the side of the stage, and just do a front roll and hardly even touch the ground. So, and I mean, me being young and impressionable at those times, I mean, I just stood in awe at those folks. And so anyway, so I did that, and I attained a second degree, almost my third degree, in Gojo Ryu Jiu-Jitsu. And then when I came up here to Alaska, there wasn't any of that. And so I got involved with Seibukan Jiu-Jitsu, which I felt was, really fun, but not quite as intense as what I had been exposed to. And now I work with Sensei Ken, who has worked with sort of Bado Ryu, which is sort of like sword type, jujitsu type stuff from the samurai. And they said that he should go ahead and teach his own variation of it. And so he's created Fudo Shen, which incorporates a lot of the ground grappling, sort of like Gracie Jiu-Jitsu, which I think that you do. And it also has a lot of the joint locks and a lot of the high falls and the rolls. And it's a smattering of, self-defense as well as health and movement, and, with law enforcement, military, and self-defense type applications. So Takado Ryu, who was a friend of O Sensei, who was the founder of Aikido. It was sort of like a very hard style. And of course, O Sensei, I mean, I've seen videos of him, and he would just take all these great big folks that were attacking him, and he'd just throw them around as if they weren't there. It's very soft and beautiful, a lot of that energy of Aikido. And your father was always telling me that I should do Aikido. In fact, when my mom would go over to see him at the conventions, he'd say, she'd always tell him that, my son says to say hi, and he would remember, he would say, oh, is he doing Aikido yet?
So, I know my dad, as my dad got older, the judo is not an easy sport to do throughout your whole life because of how aggressive it is. I trained jiu-jitsu for I think about 23 years, had 7 surgeries related to judo, and I'm probably coming up on my 8th surgery at the pretty soon because of it. And it is rough on those bones, but my kids love it, and I do Brazilian jiu-jitsu as well. But my dad, I remember him, and I did some Aikido training, but it's funny. He said, well, as you're getting older, you should do more Aikido. But there is that sense in me that I like to feel like I'm like a little bit more aggressive. That is probably a weakness of my personality, but I like to fight hard sometimes, and so I just kept with those more hard martial arts. But my dad is always saying like you should do Aikido more. So I've done some Aikido training. I'm definitely, excuse me, not an expert, not even close, but I've done some training, and I definitely agree. The way that they flow and being able to manipulate the energy of another person that's attacking you, it looks like magic for sure.
Yeah, yeah. And it really works with our work in the healing arts as well. And
Yeah.
when you know but yeah, I love it. And I also had that little aggressive side to myself too. And but as I get older, I've got to be wiser because I really don't have the stamina to do some of the ground grappling that I used to because I'm just pooped. And so, I need to neutralize something before it goes to the ground. And but even I just love the ground grappling part, and I've done quite a bit
Mhm.
of it. But and then there's the other parts of, it incorporates, the movement of chi and the meditation and,
Mhm.
Tai, Tai Chi and Qigong and those kinds of things, which are so powerful. And they help to maintain that, balance that we need to be healthy. And,
Yeah.
uh,
That was
I
actually probably one of the last things that my dad trained with me before I went to college was qigong, which was um and I still train it today and do meditation. So it was those were good lessons. We did it for like a couple of years. Uh at first I thought this is sort of crazy. It does seem a little
yeah,
bit crazy when you're a teenager, but
yeah, yeah,
yeah. But I definitely I appreciate the state of mind that it helps you achieve, and also the sensitivity to your own energy and to that around you. So yeah.
yeah. Yeah, and the idea of building, high character
Mm.
and confidence and esteem and all those issues that all our teenagers need now. But and I don't know if it's like Bruce Lee. Wow, I'm really dating myself when I say his name, but the
I
art
love
doesn't
Bruce Lee.
define. Yeah, me too. I mean, the art doesn't define the person. It's
Mhm.
like we take bits and pieces from the different arts and we incorporate it into our physical stature, into our abilities, into our character, and personality. And it's really nice to have the blend. Um, when I was in Arizona, I had the privilege of working with Fairtex Muay Thai and doing Muay Thai boxing. Um, and they were some of the greatest fighters that would come all around. In fact, I met Dan Inosanto there, who had worked with
Oh,
Bruce Lee. Yeah,
yeah.
I mean, he came into the workout facility there in Tempe, and oh, actually Chandler, and so I got to go in there and really work with that. And of course, when you put the Thai boxing together with jujitsu, you're pretty good when you're standing up or if you're on the ground. And a lot
Mhm.
of those folks, I could, pretty much knock them over and they'd look at like, what did you do? Right. And but they wouldn't let me go in the ring. I got my shorts. I could have competed, but they say, oh no, 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 you doctor, you need brain. You can't go in. So here I'd done all this work and they wouldn't even let me I just wanted to do one or two, but anyway, it
Oh,
was probably good.
my dad's been very upset with me about my hard training style because of all of my injuries, and he's like, "Well, you need to really calm down. You need to do something else." What he tried to get me into photography, and I'm like, oh, "Well, I mean, I love art, but there's something when you've been hit with the martial arts bug, it's hard to get it out of your system for sure."
Yeah, yeah. Well, I feel like what an opportunity you've had to be taught by your father. And I mean, I watched their little vital signs clip that you did. And it was just so nice to listen to your mom and your dad to speak.
Mhm.
And they are just fabulous, fabulous people. So a really good example to me. And you're fortunate to be able to have him for a father. That's really cool. So
Well, he's been a good dad for sure. Uh,
yeah.
Let me ask you, so uh, what kind of products, because I asked, what kind of Sunrider products do you recommend for somebody who is athletic? Because I have my own perspective and my own preferences, but somebody, you know, probably like a weekend warrior, probably like you and I. What are the recommended things that you have for somebody who is a weekend warrior, wants to stay fit, but doesn't have the advantages of youth anymore to help them to heal from their injuries?
Yeah. So I know Jackie was telling me about the sports caps and how good they are. And it comes in, I think it's Sunrise. Is that like the
Mm.
liquid? It comes in the yellow
Yep.
box. Yeah, Sunrise.
Yep.
And I finally got a box of that. But traditionally, I always started with the basics. Like I would always have the Cali tea. I have Cali tea every morning. I have a Cali nighttime pretty much every night or when I need to chill out. And sometimes I mix it with Fortune Delight. And
Mm.
Fortune Delight is awesome. Like I like to make a drink of Fortune Delight before I lift weights because it just
Mm.
helps to give me a little bit more energy. Um, and so I always do New Plus because New Plus is just amazing for that regeneration. I put New Plus and Vita Shake in my blender drink every single morning, and I try to get my 11-year-old daughter to take it too, and she does. And that way I know she's getting some nutrition. So I really like that. And I always use a pretty good squirt of the stevia because I have a sweet tooth. So I find that the stevia really helps me with that. And then I take the quinary, which is really convenient now because it all comes in one bottle. And so I'll
Yep.
take, a good, 3 of them 3 times a day. And then I take I believe it's Meta Balance because it has a Gymnema sylvestre in it. And
Mm.
I think that really helps to regulate blood sugars and such. And
Mm.
of course, Top
Oh,
Joy and
that's
Ease, you
Vita
know,
Taste, I think. That's what their Gymnema is in the Vita Taste. Meta Balance 44 is like the herbal multivitamin.
okay, so I'm mixing up the name again. Yeah, so I like to do those. And then I also like the Evergreen,
Mm.
the electrolyte replacement. And then Liquid 5 is pretty fun too. I like to,
Yeah.
do those. Um, but I'm investigating the sports caps a little bit more and the Sunrise because Jackie was explaining to me that it was really good for, when we're working out to help us to heal without having as many, tissue damage. And
Yeah.
inflammation is a big deal. Our whole life is dedicated at dealing with inflammation. I mean, every
Mhm.
time you step down on your foot, your cells have inflammation, and your body has to, fix that inflammation, that damage. And it's so important to have the nutrition there to deal with that. I
Yeah.
give everybody essential fatty acids. I mean, I want them all to get like a real high quality flax oil because the omega-3, 6, and 9 is like lubrication for your joints. And it
Mhm.
also is so, it's a great anti-inflammatory as well. And
Yeah.
it's good for, brain metabolism as well. So, and then of course, diet and nutrition is so critical. And I mean, our foods in America are just poisoning us. We really need to, get our produce from the farmer across the street and not rely on these huge corporate giants that are providing who knows what to us. And I mean, the FDA is, has really fallen down on keeping us safe from the foods that can cause damage. USDA, is related to somebody that used to work in Monsanto. I mean, for crying out loud, and glyphosate is in everything. And
Mhm.
that those are poisons that even NutraSweet. I mean, I like that story because your dad, Dr. Chen, was all over this because they had actually made stevia illegal,
Yeah.
back in the day, and they had taken the ban off of NutraSweet. Well, NutraSweet aspartame, as you know, is an insecticide. and it's sticky, so it would stick on the legs of the insects. And then somebody says, well, that's sweet, why don't we put it in our food? And I mean, how insane is that? And then look at the problems with aspartame. The number one cause of migraine headache. And I mean, I don't know about you, but when somebody comes in with a migraine headache in my practice, I am really worried, because that is really hard to help people with migraine headaches. And so
Migraines are tough. It's probably
yeah,
one of my more complicated patients are always with migraines, for sure.
yeah, yeah. So yeah, so I
It's a
really
little bit of a
appreciate.
cabal over there. That's actually what
Yeah,
it felt like with the stevia. And even after stevia was allowed to become a food additive, then Coca-Cola came and bought up a bunch of the stevia farms so that they could be in control. And they actually, Coca-Cola decided to create a monopoly on what what kind of stevia was allowed into the United States. So it got really, it's very interesting. We could go on about stevia, but needless to say, the stevia that they use in is a sweetener in their sodas and whatnot. They have created it in such a way that all of the nutritional benefit of the stevia has been taken out, other than the fact that it's sweet. So
yeah,
it's sort of interesting, and that is, those are the recommendations now by the FDA, which is
yeah,
interesting. So you know, it is what it
yeah,
is. But luckily, with companies like Sunrider and practitioners like yourself, you're able to get maybe what is it right now? People say the term red pilled, or being able to see the world for the way it really is, and being able
yeah,
to sort of sidestep what you normally get from maybe um, your regular healthcare provider, and see a different way of trying to make the body function better.
yeah, yeah, for sure. Well said. It's interesting, as you were speaking there, I was thinking how, because before Sunrider, I didn't really understand just how important, or the philosophy, of the regeneration, but also of the whole food concentrate. And they had done studies in the 30s where they, when ascorbic acid came out, the vitamin C, and they took a group of rats, and they induced scurvy, and then they gave that group of rats the brand new pharmaceutical grade ascorbic acid, and then they were better within a week, right? And then the other group, they gave lime juice, and they were better within hours. And the whole idea is that Mother Nature does it best. So if we have whole food concentrates like Dr. Chen and Sunrider, and that your family provides for us, what a gift to be able to understand that we need to maintain the wholeness in our foods. And ever since the pharmaceutical industry took over the vitamin and mineral and the health food industry, all we've got is all these isolates. And it's not, I mean, it used to be I could call up the vitamin company and say, oh, I'd like to make Dr. Dan's vitamin, and I want this in it, and this in it, and this in it, and this in it. And I want grade A, I want the purest form of vitamin C that you have. And that's what I'd have. And they say, okay, well, let's put that together for you. But now if you call them up, they say, oh, we have these 5 blends together. Which one would you like? Right?
Mm-hmm.
So they completely dominate that. So when you go to these stores that sell, vitamins and minerals, they're all the same things with different labels on them. And you've got the pre-run contaminants from the post-run contaminants, because they're running those machines 24-hour, 24/7. And so
Mm-hmm.
it's an industry. And people don't understand that. They don't understand how important it is to pick the plant and then take it and process it how it's supposed to be done. And hopefully it came from good soils. And then to be able to process it in such a way that it maintains the inherent healing powers of that plant, and then put it in a form that we can, put on our tables. And,
Mm-hmm.
people just don't understand what all is involved with that. And So I try to explain it to them, and they probably, get sick and tired of listening to me, I'm sure. But I appreciate that, because Sunrider was at the forefront of that, and has maintained that integrity for 40 years. I mean, I'm amazed it's been 40 years. And
I'm amazed it's been 40 years.
yeah, yeah.
I mean, I remember going to conventions when I was a child up to now, and I'm sure my parents are amazed it's been 40 years, but we've been 40 years this year, and we have our convention coming up in Texas. A little plug there for anybody who wants to come down to Texas, because that's where we're at, and we have moved our manufacturing facility from California to Texas and in the Dallas area. So if anybody wants to come down in September and check out our new Texas plant, please come on down to Texas for our convention. So it'll be great. You can get more information on our sunrider.com website. All right.
I'm hoping to attend this year.
Yes, please come, especially with this interview going up. But how do people follow you on social media or get in touch with you?
I'm really not big on social media, but I do have a website, which is Eagle River CNM for Center for Natural Medicine.com. And I do have my Sunrider page linked up to that. And I haven't written a book on paper. I've written one many times in my mind, but I just haven't gotten it on paper yet. I mean, I have a large family, so I haven't had the time to do that yet. So, but I will write a book sometime. But I've been thinking I should probably, try and do a podcast and see what I can do to, it's just the technical part. I haven't really embraced that too much yet. So, I mean, it just
tell you what, there's
patience.
it's not impossible to get started. But getting a light, a microphone, and a camera, that's pretty much what I've got right here. So I want to let people think it's super technical and advanced, but really it's not that much.
Yeah. Well, I really like the Vital Signs podcast. I think it's great. I've listened to, I didn't know about them. And when I found out about them, I was listening to them, and I really like them. You do a really good job.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. Oh, well, thank you for making time for us today. And I hope that everybody has appreciated it. It's been fun to go down memory lane, talking about some of our past, and especially a little history about my dad. Anyways, if anybody wants to follow, again, what is your website again?
Yeah, it's Eagle River CNM for Center for Natural Medicine, eaglerivercnm.com.
Awesome.
And,
yeah. And for anybody who wants to listen to more of our Vital Signs podcasts, again, we're on the Sunrider YouTube channel, on Facebook, Instagram. We're also on wherever most podcasts are available. So, and thanks again for your time, and hope that everybody has an amazing Father's Day. So yeah, for you too. So
great. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Okay.
Thank you.
Right, bye.
Thanks. Thank you. Pleasure. Yeah. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
This is Dr. Ruben Chen, and I'll see you next time.